Hello to everyone. So now we are in a live streaming for Game Global. Our topic today will be remote control, and I have joined in Rico from France, who will be sharing his experience. John, welcome to our session.
Thank you, Ismail. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing really well. I'm in Istanbul. So you are in France now, correct? In Nice or?
I'm in Nice. We're kind of right on the border with Italy, and everybody is aware of the situation. So it's getting a little bit worse and worse every day here. But we're doing our part to stay at home and as well as spread that message with everybody. And we hope that this is going to work and slow down, flatten that curve, so that we can save lives.
Yeah. We hope so. Unfortunately, this is a case that spread all around the world, and everyone has its own challenge now, but it's a global challenge now. But today's topic, I believe, will be helping our participants to understand how really they may work and from their homes. Usually now we are based in our homes and working, creating, somehow producing things from our new, let's say, basis. Prior to that, I will make a brief to our participants. I would like to greet them as well. It will be an open session for their questions, as well as they will have the chat room open for discussion. Meanwhile, we shared two questions from them. One is from where they are participating. We will be glad to hear, as well as one question about their experience so far. How long they are used to remote working. If they answer during your introduction to the topic, I will brief, also will share these questions with your side. So today the remote control and to work from home is becoming more and more popular, but I know that you are used to it for a long time. I'll be glad to hear, first of all, a brief introduction about yourself, how you are using that one prior to today's case, and now how it's changing, how we can also start to move on that perspective.
Sure. I guess I can start out probably back in 2005 when I started a translation business as a freelance translator. About, I would say, 90% of the world's translators are independent freelancers who work from home. It was something that was quite simple back in the day because we're dealing a lot with text, which is not very complicated to move across the internet. And, all you really needed was a computer, an internet connection, maybe create a website, an email address. So I've been doing translation and my business has evolved. I have a translation company. And so that continues, a lot of experience working with people, working with colleagues, working with clients who can be all around the world. In Paris, with clients in the US and Belgium, in the UK, in Italy, even been contacted by Argentina to do work with them. Later on in my career, I started working with a technology company that provides technology to translation companies like mine and independent translators or freelance individual translators. That company is called WordFast. And it's really interesting. The company was kind of founded on a very delocalized concept of everybody was working remotely since the very beginning, and it started in 1999. So if you can imagine, we have staff members in Finland, in Brazil, in China, working remotely and helping people out, and the technology is really there. So why not do it? I think one of the things that's made it possible is just having the right people and being able to trust those people, and also the leadership as well of having that sort of laissez-faire and more focused on projects and performance and reaching goals than monitoring people and making sure that you're clocking in and you're putting in FaceTime. So
very important mind shift that nowadays also will be leaving, I believe, because as you mentioned, prior to that, people was monitored, especially with the outcome or what he or she is doing. But as you mentioned, focusing on results or focusing on your productivity side was a better way to do it. And now we see that now we are focusing on that, and the trust and all these things becomes more and more important. We'll be talking more about that as well.
And that's a tough adjustment for managers to make, actually, because that requires a lot of follow-up and goal setting and support and coaching of the people that you're managing. So yeah, and not everybody's able to adapt so quickly. So in my work with the technology, I'm primarily in charge of the marketing, which is obviously done a lot online. So that's easy. It can be done from anywhere. But also I do sales. And, you know, a lot of people have this conception about a salesperson. You really need to be there to shake somebody's hand, to take them out to an event and to wine and dine them, which is, you know, great if you can have that FaceTime with people to build rapport. But really, in the end, it all comes down to listening to your client's needs, finding out what it is that they, you know, the problems that they have, what their pain points are, and what their goals are. And if you have the solution for that, and you can show them how to do that, and tell them, you know, in a way that you have what they need, and then you're able to show them to it. And that's what comes to like these tools, like, and that, you know, a lot of people are becoming familiar with right now, Zoom and Teams and GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting. And a lot of people didn't really know they exist, but we've been using them for about 15 years or so to do demos online, to have contact like this with people if necessary. So that's
comparably today, you may say, I believe that the tools had a huge progress. So technically, how you compare, it would be tougher to work in the past years. So your experience is becoming easier and easier nowadays.
No, I mean, I literally, honestly, I've been using GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar for 10 years, or about 10 years, and I haven't seen much change. They finally decided that they were a precursor in it, and they had a system that worked. And I think now there's a bunch of newcomers, and so they're a little bit upping their game. That's what happens to incumbents. They kind of like get comfortable and like, okay, we've got, you know, constant revenue stream. We don't have to do much, maybe. So I've seen some developments that they've done recently, and you see that they're all kind of pushing the limits and, you know, adding different features. I was really impressed to see, you know, what Zoom does with the number of people that you can have on there, and simultaneous videos. A lot of people are setting up air happy hours, virtual happy hours. So I've attended quite a few of those, thanks to the network, a JCI network, you know, around the world, connecting with people. I'll be doing that later today, actually, with our friends in Tunisia. So yeah, these tools are evolving quickly, and I think one of the big things is obviously, you know, the internet is the lifeblood of all of this. So if you have a fast connection versus a slow connection, if you're stuck on a 4G network versus a Wi-Fi versus, you know, a connected cable, everything's going to depend depending on that.
It's important to emphasize that, as you mentioned, these tools were already there. So you mentioned from GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, Zoom. So people had to digitalize, somehow had to adapt. So this period helps, I believe, to transform and to be fast adapting during these weeks. So there is no new tool, as you mentioned. There are some progress sure during the period, but or some change. But the tools were there. So I would be glad to hear more about then your experience about remote controlling and this tool.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So what I decided to do is just talk about some basic things. Everything. I think when you're working remotely, it's really a question of time management more than anything. A little bit space management. I didn't really want to get into that because this was really focused on people who are, you know, pushed into remote working right away, who can't really create a new office space and, you know, have to make do with what they have. So I didn't really want to go much into that, but I think it's really a question of managing your time appropriately and being able to separate your, you know, personal time from your professional time, from your volunteer work time. And that's going to be the key thing. So I thought I would show you, you know, time management. For anybody who's familiar with time management, I teach courses on this a lot. So I thought I would just cover some of the basic principles. If we're going to talk about time and how important it is, it all starts with your goals. Basic goal setting. You can see these goals. I've got my 12-year goals, my 6-year goals, 3 years, 1 year, and 6 months in different categories of my life. And every year, at least every year, I'll take a look at these goals, cross off the things that I've accomplished, change things around, decide, okay, things have changed in my life. I don't want this or that. It's really great to put these things down in paper, and it's very important to write these things down. Because
at this moment, may I interrupt, John, asking
yes.
The time scope, like you talked about with long term, like 12 years, 6 years, 1 year, and now maybe we are talking about a quarter planning, like 3 months. How you decide the time frame?
I think you have to have just long-term vision in your life. So I did it just kind of, I don't know if it's not really a Fibonacci sequence or anything like that, but I just kind of went with 6 months. You could go down into 3 months and 1 month and break it down even further. But for me, I think, it's hard to look 12 years out. You would look at that, I kind of blurred out my goals because I didn't want to really get into my personal details.
It's more like a vision, but we can see something, but not very clear. Yeah.
So in the 12 years out, there's not very many goals. So you should have very few. You should have 1 to 2 to 3 or something. It's really hard to project yourself where you're going to be that far out, and then you can kind of work backwards. And so, you could go down to a 1 month where, maybe people are in confinement for 1 month or 2 months, but, sit down, write down some goals. It's a great opportunity to figure out what are some things that you want to change. This is forcing us to change habits right now. People don't change habits unless they're in a crisis, and we're in a crisis. So you can either, keep on doing things the way you were doing, or you can change your habits and learn to operate differently, and maybe those habits will stay with you when you get out. So one of the ways to do that is to sit down and write down what are those changes you want to make. So I did that with my wife the other day. We sat down, what were the things that we wanted to do, and those got put into my goals. And then after you have these goals, basically they go down to put down action plans. Well, how am I going to get there? What I'm going to have to do? And I just give a little screenshot. I've got a book that I use. I think you can see it in the camera, that has 31 days, 32 days, different sections for each day. And basically I kind of plan tasks and stuff that I need to get done at different times. If I get a bill in the mail, it doesn't need to get paid today or something, I'll put it into the day that I need to deal with it. So it helps me with prioritization of what needs to get done when, in order to figure things, because you have multiple goals, right? You've got personal life, etc. So you need to break those down into actionable plans, and those actionable plans will have tasks associated with them that need to be performed in a certain period in time, not necessarily all at once. So there's just a way to get organized. One way to get organized, and then once you've kind of have all of your, you're putting your tasks in some sort of way of classifying them from important and not urgent and urgent based on when they need to be done. What I generally do, and I think this is important that you kind of do, because most people who are not, have to go into the office, you have a fixed schedule, right? You've got a fixed schedule that starts at the day you get into work and the moment you leave. And so you have these time, and you'll start seeing when you're remote working, you don't really have those boundaries anymore. So you really need to—
time management responsibility is up to you then.
Yeah, and I think that one way of doing managing that time, a lot of people say, oh, I can't work remotely because I'll be too distracted to I'll want to do the laundry at some point, or I'll want to do this, and that's fine if you want to do that. And I don't think there's any problem. I do that all the time. I take breaks and I do different things. But the key thing is to really plan your day. So what I do is I print out, you've got my calendar. I've got multiple calendars. I've got my Facebook calendar integrated in there. I've got my volunteer work calendars, my professional work, my personal calendars. Everything goes into my calendar with all my appointments and agendas, and I print that out. And every single day have kind of a time, for me, at least 15 minutes to look at what are the things that I need to do. I look at my book that I showed you earlier and see if there's anything that I had planned for the day that I need to get done that particular day, and I schedule and I write it in. You can probably see here.
Does it mean that your daily schedule then is a discipline for you to have most of that? So otherwise, we may use the time, or we may confuse the business side, volunteer side, or your personal side.
Exactly.
The interruption and confusion might be higher in such case. Then we should have really an agenda and a plan for that.
Right. So what I have in my exactly. So what I have there is something that gets printed out, and it kind of changes with meetings that get set in. So really only meetings get put in there, and then in the printout I write down. You can kind of see here. I'll write down the different tasks that I have to do. They're not necessarily meetings. So the agenda is just for meetings, and the tasks get written down. I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to be working from this time to this time, and then maybe I'll plan in my breaks. And so. I think that's a really key thing to be able to separate, and not let distractions happen at home, or plan those distractions in. Okay, I want to, do some guitar practice. Okay, that's fine. Even when you're at work, you have a lot of unproductive hours when you're working in an office. You're having a coffee break, you're out for lunch, maybe there's some downtime. I don't know, maybe you are super productive in an office. I haven't been working in an office for about 20 years, so I wouldn't know, but
so you are full remote worker.
full on remote working.
Yeah. And meanwhile, let me greet the participants. We have some friends as well who are participating. I would like to greet, I see Alma, Rania is there, Halil. Hello, welcome to our session. Ira, Alexander, Utku, it's really great to have you. You may freely use the chat site, as well as there is a ask a question button on the screen. You may put your questions to John during our session, or at the end. I may pass the questions. Thank you. Good afternoon, Rania. So
hi, Rania.
From Lebanon.
Hi, Marie-Noël. How are you? It's good to see you. Annalisa, Itai, see a lot of friends from around the world. Alexandre, Ira, nice to see you. We have Latvia, Zimbabwe. It's great.
Different countries. I see in our questionnaires, majority of our participants is from Europe. We have participants from Africa, Middle East, and America. I thank you for their participation. We had a question about how long have you been remote working? Now it's 50%. Half of the participants say I'm totally new to this, and half of them say that I'm remote working for age. So the audience also is half to half, and you may continue accordingly sharing your experience.
Okay. If anybody has any questions on this kind of your daily planning, if you're doing this, to give a shout out, let us know if this is something that you do, that you sit down either the evening before your day to plan the following day, or in the morning you do things, do some planning. Yeah, and I know there are a lot of digital tools, and I've kind of tested them and played around with reminders and tasks on my phone, and I've done let's see what else. There's to do what was it called? I was using it for quite a while. I was trying a Todoist, and you experiment with the different things, find out what works for you. But I like having that paper that's really flexible, and I can kind of cross things out. It's a really great feeling. It's a much better feeling when you cross something out on this piece of paper that I got it done than checking a box on the computer. I don't know what it is about it, but
this is a question that comes from Hakan Kash asks, like working with printed material shows that we are getting older. So, but more and more people nowadays are using digital version instead, as you mentioned. There are some digital tools as well that we may use and to increase our efficiency. It depends what you prefer, correct?
Yeah, I'll show again. Ira asked about showing this book, and I'll do it a little bit longer, and I'll make it a little bit slower, not move so much. But basically, you have a section for each day. I'm going to try and open it. You have to be careful because all my stuff might fall out. But basically, I can open it right here to day number 11, the 11th day of the month, and I have nothing that I have planned right now to do on the 11th.
Okay.
So that's kind of how this book works. There are 32 little tabs, and the 32 means that's
This
something
blue book is for a month. Is it for a month?
it's for a month. There's 32 tabs. Why 32? Because the last one down there for things that are totally not urgent, that don't need to be done anytime this month, and that are something that I can follow up with in next month or whatever. An example is frequent flyer miles. Sometimes I forget to give my frequent flyer number. Whatever, you have about 6 months to go and check that and to do that. It's something that's totally not urgent with all the crazy things you have going on. So I usually throw those in the back, and then I'll get to them sometime when I just have plenty of free time on my hands. The other thing that I was showing Ira was this. This is my printout of it's in a plastic folder because I usually take it with some of the tasks and the papers that I need for that particular day, but I'll just print this out and then I'll write down my tasks on there and cross them off as they get completed. And I schedule everything. When I have that day, I sit down and say, okay, I'm going to have lunch at this time, and I'm going to take a nap at this time, and work out and have breakfast. And it just gives me something to kind of follow my day plan.
So it's a great way of, and also an example, the blue book that you shared, another tool that we may use for our daily planning. It will help a lot for remote working because we need to control that.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Karina, a good friend from a colleague from work who's joining us from Buenos Aires. Hi, Karina.
Hello, Karina. Hi. Thanks for joining us.
So then I just wanted to work on, some of the other things, since I said, there's a space and time thing, time management, and that's why I'm focusing on time management. A lot of time management is also about getting rid of distractions. And one thing that I can't understand, people who have, distractions on their phone, all these icons popping up and things buzzing all the time. And that's the worst possible thing you can do for time management. It can, destroy your concentration when you need to be working on important things that are going to help you reach those important goals that you set down. And if you get caught up in the daily WhatsApp and Facebook and being distracted constantly, you're not going to be able to get those things done. And I'm preaching. I do my fair share of checking these things, but I try. I mean, you look at my phone. Okay, there's something wrong right now, but I do have, for some reason, I have 3 notifications. I don't know what that's for. Maybe some long-term reminders I set up, but there's no notifications, nothing that pops up. It's really me. I have to go into those, call them time bandits, the things that steal your time. I have to go in there on my own time when I decide that, okay, now is on my schedule. I set up, a good 15 minutes, a half an hour for consulting these things. And I try and tell people too, sometimes, if they expect an answer right away from WhatsApp, that for me, that's not emergency communication. It's more like email. If somebody needs to get hold of me really urgently, I'll take SMSs, text messages. Okay, that's fine. You can text me, and I'll get that message. I allow those to pop up, but definitely not WhatsApp with all the groups that people are using nowadays and all the notifications you get. So that was just one thing I wanted to mention really quickly, is to get rid of those distractions as much as possible on your screen, little pop-ups and notifications and everything. It's gone, all that gone. Another thing that I think is important, especially during this time, is I know that there's a lot of uncertainty, and I find myself, tempted to be looking at all the news all around the world and reading lots of news. And I found that in my life, that I've been most productive and been, a lot better off emotionally and sane, I guess, just in general, when I'm not too focused on my sphere of concern, which Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which basically means looking at the news from major news outlets and finding out all these things that are going on in the world and all these terrible whatever, and a lot of the things that we can't really affect, or even if we know about it, it's not really changing much in our life. So it
may directly affect us, contrary, correct?
What's that? Yeah, I mean, it's something that is, we can, I contrast this. I like to read the local news, because the local news, it really tells me about things that are happening in my local community. And this is places where it's my, my sphere or circle of influence, if you will, where I can actually do something about. And if I'm reading about articles in the New York Times or the Washington Post, and it just gets me really frustrated, and why is this injustice happening, and why are they so stupid, and whatever, it really, I think, puts a drag on your, productivity and just your mental sanity. And if you focus on your local news, my local newspaper, they have a section that talks about the major international news, and I get a fair share of news from people who I appreciate via Facebook and other social media, where I don't need to be going in and looking at all the news in the world in order to follow this crisis on time. So that's just another little tip more along the lines of time management. I might be.
There are two things that you mentioned. One is to control the time. It's more like a self-discipline. Yeah. And the other one now you are mentioning is more about to control the information flow. Yeah. In order to have the relevant information that will really put you or keep you in positive spirits. Yeah. And in your area of productivity or relevant things. Otherwise, you may misuse your time.
Exactly, and that's these things can really take over that time that you have, and you need to, that's why I talked about remote control, having control of your time, because you don't have anybody looking over your shoulder. I know companies that limit your Facebook. They don't even allow you to get to Facebook on the the company servers. They don't, you've got open offices, and so you have this kind of, I'm not going to open up a newspaper and be reading it, but now you're at home and nobody sees what you're doing, and so you can be so. It's just to be wary of that, and don't get caught up in the endless black hole of news feeds around the world and everything. So yeah. And this was a little tip that a lot of people talk about, and I must say it does work a little bit if you need to have some concentration. If you've got other family members in the home, to put on a headset, earphones, even if you don't put on the music because it distracts you. But it's a signal that tells people that you're busy working on something. I think this is what Felipe was actually saying the other day, that they had all these open air offices. Now what do people do? They all put on earphones because they they want to show they don't want to be distracted with what they're doing. So this is more of a tip. This can also work at home if you've got a baby running around and your wife doing things and whatever. I'm sure we all have our own distractions, because a lot of us don't necessarily have a spare room in our home that's dedicated to a remote office. Some of us might, and that's great. They can shut the door and they can come out of their office when it's personal time and time to be in personal space. And so that's a little tip that I had. Let's see, where are we going with this? I also wanted to talk about some tools that I think are really helpful and that I use personally that could be of help for you, that are somewhat related to this time management, and also some other software. And I'll explain why I think they're really important for remote working. One of the tools that I use is Doodle, doodle.com. And I'm sure that many of you are familiar with it. They have a free service for scheduling meetings. If you're trying to decide when everybody should meet at a certain time, what's the best time for everybody to meet, and everybody answers and whatever. Well, they also have a paid for service, and I think it costs maybe 50 euros per year. And I find that very valuable. They have, for example, the possibility of having these booking times for calendars. In my work, I do a lot of phone calls and demos with people. And so I basically, if I'm managing my calendar well, this calendar, I send them a link and they open it up, and they end up on this page that says, okay, here's the times that I'm available, and they can book it. I have a work calendar. I've got a volunteer calendar. And so we can just schedule a call. And when they schedule that call, it goes automatically into my agenda. I receive an email about it that says, hey, you've got a call scheduled with so-and-so at that time. And it's great. I don't have to do anything like a calling person trying to figure out, well, when are you free? Well, when are you free? I just send them a link and say, hey, please just book a time on my agenda. This really works only if you're really good at managing your calendar. And that's why I have things like my Facebook calendar, which is integrated into my calendar, so that if I've agreed to go to Facebook events that are scheduled, well, it'll cancel that particular time. You can see probably that I've got one of these times, and April 6th is probably because I've got another meeting scheduled already at that particular time. Same thing on the 9th, etc. Okay.
This tool also helps with multiple participants planning, because if you want to find like a common date or time,
yeah,
and everyone may put their available schedule, or they may choose from this tool, and it may help very easy to schedule a meeting, especially nowadays while we're trying to do digital meetings. If we are looking for a common time to have that meeting, Doodle will be a really good tool for that.
Excellent tool for that. And like I said, that's really the free version, and anybody can use that. You've got ads popping up with this. When you pay for it, you really get a lot of extra features that I think are really great for managing your time. If you have to book meetings or book calls, or everything, it's been worth the investment for me. So I continue to pay for it every year. You can brand it, so you can see, like, for example, it's branded with my company's logos and everything. When they land on my page, it looks like our page. So that's one thing. I wanted to show another thing as well. Another tool that I've found very useful is when you're working remotely, communication is a very important thing. And if communication is a very important thing, we all know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I would recommend getting screenshot software or video screen capture software, dedicated software that does that for you. I use one that's called Snagit, Snagit. And you have some basic ones, I think, that come on with the a basic Mac platform. You can take screen captures and you can send it. You can even capture a video of your screen. But with Snagit, what you can do is you can then, once you take that screenshot, you can update it really easily by adding steps to it with little 1s or 2s, and it goes in sequential order. You can blur out things that you don't want people to see. You could add arrows and shapes and even call outs and say, oh, we need to do this, we need to change that. And I do that. I mean, this whole presentation was basically done making screenshots, you can add shadows to it. It looks really nice. And that goes along the lines of, you're not face-to-face with people and you're communicating by email. You could write out a bunch of things, do this, do this, do this, or you could just, take a screenshot and be really effective by showing them that, or even doing a screen recording. Once you do this, you can also easily share that to the web. So I could, once I've finished my presentation, I can click on the share button in the top right, and I can share that, and it'll create a link that I can copy to my clipboard and then paste in a WhatsApp chat, and people can just click on it and go directly and see the image. So it's really helpful, I think, for that visual communication.
I just put these two recommendations that you have in the chat part. It's Snagit. So you can easily find it from Snagit. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. And I'm not getting commissioned by any of these companies. I just wanted to tell you what tools work for me.
These are tools that you are used to, and they were helpful. So
yeah. And if people have some suggestions, feel free to share. We got this collective intelligence going, and I'm sure there's other tools out there that could be helpful. Maybe even some free tools, because these are things that I use. They cost something, but again, it's all about investment. These are tools that help you work and be more productive in general. Another tool that
we will be grateful if our participants also may put their names of their tools that they are using that they believe is helpful. They may put them on the chat site, so we may also share the name of these tools as well. Yeah, please, you may continue.
Another tool that I use, and this really depends on how you're using mail, your email service. I know that a lot of people today are on like web browser emails. Some of you have Outlook installed. Some of you have Mac Mail. And everything is different. I'm on a Mac, and one of the tools, it's okay. Mac Mail is great. I can centralize all of my email addresses. I have like 12 of them, honestly, and they all come into one application. So I'm not opening up different navigators. I think that's really important for people who don't use Outlook or Mac Mail or Thunderbird or something to really look into those solutions. What I've found with Mac Mail and is that it's missing some features that I wanted to do, and I think some of them are available in Outlook. One of them, for example, was being able to schedule an email. Now, if you're working remotely, you get to call your own shots. So you can like decide, hey, I want to go for a run in the morning, on my balcony because we're confined, but I want to do something at this time, and I want to work later on in the evening. Or I'm gonna schedule in again on my day planner, like I need to do something at this time and much later, and sending off an email at who knows what hour, 9 p.m. or 1 a.m., who knows what it is, it's maybe not as good or not as effective. And so you can schedule it for a different time. Remember, because you are having these different time periods, especially if people work around the world, you can just schedule it. Okay, I know I'm sending this to somebody who's going to get into the office at 8 o'clock. I want this to be the first thing that arrives on their, when they open up their email inbox, they get it, boom. And so they deal with my email. So that's a really great tool that, again,
the last email on their inbox will be the first they see, correct? In such case.
Yeah. So I mean, they'll open it up, and instead of receiving it at you finish your email and you say, okay. Of course, as soon as you finish an email, you want to send it off because you're super happy. Oh yeah, I got my email done. And it's like, okay, it's 11:30 at night or whatever. I know the person's gonna get it. In the meantime, they're gonna get 10.
We have to show that we are working, in early mornings, like 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
So you could schedule it for like 4 a.m. whatever. It's why not?
Okay.
But the thing is on their email, they're gonna get it. It's gonna be way down there. Usually when people, I think most people they show their email from the most recent received. So they open up their computers at 9 a.m. and they're going to have a list of all the emails that we received from 9 a.m. And then if you sent yours at 11, it's going to be all the way down to number 10. So they're not going to deal with it until that email number 10. So that might be one of the reasons why to do that as well. So this software that I use is called Mail Butler. Like Alfred the Butler, but Mail, M-A-I-L. There's lots of other features with that too. One of the ones that I like is being able to set up email templates. If you do a lot of, and again, this is maybe not so much for remote working. You can use this software if you're in an office, but you have typical emails that you write to people all the time. And so you should have a lot of different templates set up so that you could just quickly grab that template and then, change the names and the addresses and whatever the numbers that need to get changed so that you're not retyping things all the time. So that was just another added plus from that tool. And that goes along with another tool that you can use on your OS. Usually, I'm not familiar with Microsoft, how it's done, but I know that this exists, where you can create shortcuts. For example, if we come back to the doodle thing that I was telling you about earlier, how I send a link to people, all I have to do is type DOOJMD, and it creates the link automatically. It works on my phone. It works on my it works on what else? On all my different computer systems and chats and whatever. So that's very helpful. Oh, we got somebody who came to say hi. Look, say hi, everybody. Hi.
Hello. Very nice to see him. Very good.
So this is really great. Again, a little time saver, being more effective and efficient. That I use all the time when I'm writing my emails. Another thing that I wanted to talk about maybe is when you're working in the office, I think you have different routines set up. Like everybody goes for a smoke break or a coffee break at a certain time, or something happens, you have a general like team meeting at a certain time. So you're getting up and you're moving around a lot. Maybe at home, you don't have, you have new routines and new things. One thing you can do on most computers is you can change your system clock, update it so that it announces every 30 minutes. It says the time. So it says, okay, it's it's 12:30. It's 1 o'clock. Or, you could do it by hour, you could do it by half hour. The reason I say that is because it's good to get up. It reminds you of the time that you're spending, and also not to be seated too much, like too long. It's a really unhealthy thing that's going to kill us all in the end. All office workers, is that we spend our majority of our life sitting down in a chair. And so if you're sitting down for 3 hours on end and not moving, it's not really healthy. So if you kind of give this little alert, also it's been shown that your concentration starts to wane after a certain time. There's people have methods like the Pomodoro methods. They work for 30-minute sprints and then take 5 minutes. Some people say, okay, an hour. There's lots of different theories out there, but this is just a way to I need to
remind you.
Get up and remind you. I've had this for a while, but now I work standing up, so I don't really have this problem anymore.
This also a good recommendation to make a standing meeting, correct, or digital meetings, because we are used to do our meetings while we sit. Yeah. And if we have a couple of meetings during the day, it will start to hurt us. To do a standing meeting, we just need maybe to have a Bluetooth, micro set, and etc. What's your experience on that perspective?
Well, like I said, I'm standing up pretty much all the time. So not for this particular webinar, I wanted to be comfortably seated and whatever. But actually, you can see behind me maybe my workstation. There's I have a screen that's higher, so I stand up and I have a second screen. I look at the higher screen and I type down below, and that's something that. I mean, if you're going to be working remotely or even in an office, I suggest doing the sooner the better. It feels great by the end of the day. It feels like I'm really exhausted and I want to just sit down and take a break and lay down, have my own personal time and not be working on the computer anymore. So that's another thing to kind of consider. I know that a lot of people who are, the half of you that are forced to work remotely now don't necessarily have the time to go out and get a new chair and a desk and all this awesome setup, and you're maybe working at a kitchen table and it's not very comfortable, and it's probably not going to be very healthy for your back or whatever. So you can look at different setups. You can stack things on books. You have to be careful if you're working on a laptop, of course. Working standing up with just a single laptop, your neck's going to hurt. You'll see, because you're going to be going like this, looking at a screen down below. So that's not really ideal. You have to really get a second screen or a second keyboard that you can connect to your computer. And if anybody has any suggestions in terms of like kind of those time management software things, or like little, there's buzzers or things that you can install and set up, that could be really helpful. And lastly, marry somebody who's very patient with you. I'm fortunate enough to have a wife who's very patient with me, because I do a lot of work from the home, and sometimes, you've got important things that go over. The limits of it shouldn't really be the time where you're doing that. You should be spending time with the family or whatever. And it is a challenge to manage. And I think it's going to be especially hard for people who are forced into this and who, maybe are, working these late hours and their family isn't used to it because they used to come home and the job was done. Maybe you won't. Maybe new remote workers are just going to clock out at the same time. Maybe it's just me who likes to work a lot, and there's always something to be done because I'm working on lots of things at the same time. So
you are right. Prior to this period, we had a, let's say, special time where we were going to work. And then maybe when we come back to our homes, we are not bringing, let's say, the business to home, but now the business is at home. So either we have to separate that physically or technically as it is possible, or otherwise we will not have much chance to balance the relationship as well. So the remote work requires, as you mentioned, that communication, and it will help. Meanwhile, you may close your screen share then. I think the slides are finished. Yeah.
My slides are finished. I'm just trying to figure out how to change, how to close the screen share. I'm afraid it says close video, but I don't.
No, okay. So let me see if I'm able to do it. Am I? No. Okay, I think we removed John. Or let's try to reconnect. Meanwhile, if you have a question regarding the remote control, this will be the right timing. I think we did something wrong. Yeah.
I definitely did something wrong, but now we're back, and that's good.
But we are on screen. Yeah, that's great. So meanwhile, if you have a question for John, you may pass now on ask the question part. Meanwhile, I'll be asking John to sum up the remote control and working from home period and how you see the future. Do you think it will be changed, or this will be now new lifestyle, let's say?
So yeah, just to sum up, like I said, this is a lot of what working remotely is all about time management and having a little bit self-control. So that's really what I wanted to focus on. There's little tools and tips. I didn't really go over all of the new face-to-face meeting tools because I think you're all discovering them right now, right? You've all had the chance to join some of the meetings. What I see, this is a terrible thing that's happening in the world right now, obviously. And I try and stay as positive and optimistic as I can about the future. And the positive and optimistic things I see in the future that come out of this is that crises force people to change their habits. And we're going to see this. All of you remote workers who weren't doing this previously, who are now at home and, are probably asking yourself, wow, is it actually working? I'm able to work remotely. And, when this crisis is over, when you go back to the office, maybe you're going to decide to spend 1 or 2 or 3 days working from home in the future. Well, if that becomes, widespread, we're talking about massive reduction of pollution in terms of daily commutes for people to go to work and to come back from work. There's some people who, spend 45 minutes, up to 45 minutes, an hour commuting to and from work. It's not only a huge loss in time in a commute, that's time that can be spent doing other things in your life, personal goals that you want to accomplish, because you now have freed up an hour and a half or 2 hours each of those days that you would normally be commuting to focus on those goals. So that's what I'm hopeful that this is, this forced remote working is going to help people realize that it's not so difficult in the end, and hopefully the companies will begin to realize that if they've got the right people in place who they can trust, who are getting the job done and not just clocking in, that they'll be able to start doing this, and they'll see that it works. Because before they were a little bit reticent, not only they didn't want to invest in all the possibility of having people do that, but also they weren't maybe sure if it's going to work. And so this is really the test of will it work?
It's a test and learning period, most probably.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Halil Ozanözgür shared some tools, Evernote, Airtable, G Suite apps like Gmail, Drive, Calendar. These are also very useful tools that he recommends. I thank you. There is a question from Hakan Kaş. He says, I understand that you have been working also for a technical company. Do you have a subordinate teammates reporting directly to you? And how do you manage to control them remotely? Or are there any other tools that you may recommend to control the team, let's say the teammate?
Yeah, okay. So my experience with that is not this year because I had a busy year, but usually every year I take on interns, and my interns are based in California, pretty much, which is a 9-hour difference. And I've had up to 10 interns that I've been managing at any given time. I think the last time I did it, I had 10 or 12 interns. I can't remember. It's a lot of people to manage. And so that was all done remotely, and it was it all boiled down to first talking to the people and talking about what were the goals that we wanted to accomplish, what were the things that they wanted to work on, what they were interested in learning, and setting up those goals, and then putting them into teams also so that they can self-manage themselves and kind of work together, setting up that process, and then talking them through the basic project management principles and tools, and giving them the tools that they needed to create action plans for that and to manage the tasks between them. And so the tools that I've used in the past have been Asana. And now I've got, I also have sort of interns with volunteer work, but
Asana is a project management tool, correct?
Yeah, Asana is a project management tool. Now I'm experimenting with Planner from Microsoft. And, I've done like a lot of work with, waterfall method and agile and Scrum. And so testing all these things. But so far, yeah, my experience has been with Asana and with Planner. I know people use Trello. I see that somebody talked about maybe.
Yeah, Trello was there.
Trello
is one of these tools.
Yeah.
And there are multiple of them. So it's more about using a project management tool where the teammates are part of it. And we delegate a kind of a to-do list. So we have assignments for them. Yeah. And we follow the timing.
And they follow the timing. And something I learned from a fantastic trainer way back when, 2009, at a JCI World Congress, Iris Barnert from Munich, who did a course at that World Congress about international project management, and she said that the two most important factors of why international projects fail is different conceptions of time between cultures. So that's something to take into consideration. We've been talking a lot about time and how important it is, but when you're at an international level, it becomes really different based on cultural values. Some people are, we all have that stereotypical idea of the German time. If you're 5 minutes, if you're on time, you're already late or something. So and whereas in other cultures, it's more about the relationship, and time is much more flexible. And so she talked about that, and then she also talked about definitions and terms, like defining terms, and you can see how important that is with the ISO standards, which is like standardized things. And the most important part of that ISO process is defining the terms. What are we talking about? And so if you're
to be clear about expectations as well, all to be very set clearly. Yeah.
And so I've had that experience working with those people. I also run a project management course for the University of Strasbourg, and so I teach these methods, and that's done remotely. So we'll have a session, maybe 1 or 2, to check in, and there's some coursework that the students do, and then I basically put them into teams based on problems and opportunities that they identify and that they want to solve, like real problems, real opportunities in their professional lives. And then they kind of vote, and some certain ones emerge as the most interesting, and they form teams, and they figure out, okay, what they're going to work on, and they document the whole process, and it works. And they're able to get things done, and they have to schedule their time accordingly. And the feedback is often, oftentimes it's the problem is just with the scope of what they've set out to do. Sometimes it's a little bit over optimistic, and that happens to me a lot with my task planning. I write down like, oh my God, look at all these things that you're going to get done, and then at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take, and I didn't get that one done, and I didn't get that one done. But at least you've got it written down. That it's got to get done the next day, how important it was. And if you realize that you keep pushing things back to the next day and to the next day, then maybe it's not so important and it doesn't need to get done at all.
So it's moving forward. I thank you very much, John. It was a great honor to welcome you, to have a chance to communicate as well with this opportunity. I thank to all participants for their contribution with the questions. I'll be asking how they can reach you if they want to communicate further, to talk with you, from which contact point they may reach you.
You can find me on LinkedIn, I think, and Facebook, John Rico. Email, I guess I can type my email into this chat.
The chat box.
And if somebody wants to follow up with some questions, I'm more than happy to get a conversation going.
We can share the presentation that you sent with participants. We have the contact details. Also, this video will be ready just after our session for replay. If they are interested, they may review or share the video with their colleagues. We may expand it. Meanwhile, we opened a discussion board on Gain Global's platform. It's an open platform for communication. We would like to have the chance to talk and discuss further. We will be glad to welcome you there on board and to have a chance to continue this discussion. For final words, John, it's
my final words are thanks again for this opportunity, Ismail. I hope it's been helpful for everybody who tuned in. I noticed a lot of names. It's really great to know that you were there, and I hope to see you again soon. I know a lot of you from network, from JCI work, and I know that you're all thinking the same thing when we're going to be able to travel. We're living in difficult times, but stay optimistic, stay positive, and it's only a matter of time. Time heals all wounds, and so hopefully we'll make it through this all together. Thanks again, Ismail, and good luck with all that you're doing. Thank you for making these sessions available for people, sharing knowledge, sharing best practices. That's what we need to do in times like this. Help people be more productive and lead better lives. Hopefully, I hope,
Yeah, it was very helpful. I really appreciate it. And this was the pure reason to have a chance to talk and to share and to keep the positive spirit, as you mentioned. And also, this is a good time also to relearn, to rebuild our skills, to reshape our mentality. I believe that all these opportunities we may move further and to better periods. I thank you for your contribution. We keep in touch. I thank for participants, and we will be communicating. Tomorrow, I would like also to emphasize, I will have one more special guest. We will have Secretary General of Junior Chamber International, Kevin Hin. We'll have a chance to talk about to keep the economy as well moving. What is the role of young people? How we can initiate new things, new projects, how we can work on our entrepreneurial spirit. So you are welcome as well tomorrow, same time here. We will be talking further and keep the discussion. Thank you, John, and thank you to all participants. Keep in touch, stay safe and healthy. Hope we see each other somewhere around the world.
Ciao. Bye, everybody.